Kadosh, Bekiim Bahalacha 3, day 10, Siman Hey, page 17. Right? We're in the middle of the footnote. May an Ashkenazi Jew change his pronunciation. Rav Yitzchak Kook ruled that no one may change his manner of pronunciation for another. If someone does and he recites the Shema in his adopted pronunciation, he's considered that once he did it without proper care to properly say the words correctly. Although he fulfills the mitzvah of Shema, it's still forbidden to do it in this manner. The response of Mishpatei Oziel disagree with this ruling. It is impossible for us to decide which way of pronouncing Hebrew is the correct one, he asserted, and therefore whichever tradition one chooses is acceptable. One cannot be accused of pronouncing the words incorrectly. Maran, the Rishon LeZion, expressed a surprise that neither of these scholars mentioned the historical precedents of Rav Natan Adler, but took great pains to change his manner of pronunciation. Obviously, the rule against reciting Shema without taking proper pronunciation does not apply to someone who changes traditions. The response to the skill of these cites a letter from Rabbi Arav Shabtai Bohbot, chief rabbinical court of Beirut, ruling in favor of Mishpatei Oziel in his debate with Rav Kook. Right? Rav Adiyah added that there's no basis, right? He says there's no basis to forbid an Ashkenazi Jew from adopting Sephardic tradition pronunciation, neither from perspective of Halacha nor from the Kabbalah. On the contrary, it is it is commendable step, especially since most Ashkenazi Jews do not differentiate between Aleph and Ayin. Halacha demands each one of these letters to be separately. So both of Mishpatei Oziel and the Askil of D, he added an extra element in favor of changing to adopt the Sephardic tradition, since at one time the Jews living in the land of Israel were Sephardic Jews. Any Ashkenazi Jews who immigrated to the land would should have automatically adopted the Sephardic traditions and abandoned, right, their Ashkenazi Jews, right? Yes, right. This is Maran's ruling in the Avkat Rochel. Besides, beginning in the 20th century, all Ashkenazi immigrants have adopted Sephardic manner of pronunciation in the schools and on the street. This being the case, it would be fitting for the Jews in the land of Eretz Yisrael to pronounce Hebrew in one unified tradition and leave behind the manner of pronunciation they learned in the exile. Rav Yaakov Yisrael Kanievsky, he says in Kanya de Grata, he ruled that even Sephardic Jews must pronounce the names of Hashem like Oi, like the Ashkenazi Jews. And if they would pronounce it like Oi, he argued, it would sound as if they are addressing more than one God. If you're doing Nai, meaning Rav the Stipler said, if you're doing like Sfaradim, it's Kilu, you're saying more than one God. Heaven forbid. He added that he had heard reports that in several places Sephardic Jews have adopted this practice. The great Sephardic Torah scholars of all generations, however, rejected this argument. Those of Rav Kanievsky likewise have steadfastly continued the tradition of our ancestors. In the Yalkut Yosef, he wrote an article of Ramin Mazuz, right, and soundly refutes argument. He proved conclusively that even in the era of the Rishonim, Hashem's name was pronounced as Amonai, as we do today. This is clear from the Ramban's letter of the rabbis of France, right, from the writings of Yosef Chaim and from others. Harav Mazuz, right, then he turned on the offensive, right, and he says, how dare, right, the Ashkenazi rabbis complain about our pronunciation. He declared when they ignore the fact that they knowingly mispronounce the letters of Ayin and Hey, when they recite the Shema, as if say, you must destroy God, and to destroy him, and God is captured, and many more, because of the way that they're saying it, right? So see more about this in the Sfat Emet, authored by Rav Tzion HaKohen. He proves conclusively that the sound of the Kamatz is identical to the Patach, and not at all similar to the Cholam. Okay, so now we have to teach our youngsters. So he comes and he says like this: we have to teach our youngsters the difference between the Kamatz and the Patach. As mentioned above, the response of Rav Palin, this is the Ben Ish Chai. So Ben Ish Chai complained that people paid no attention to the distinction between the Kamatz and the Patach, while Rabbeinu Bachai said that there was. So based on this, the Yalkut Yosef recommended strongly that in our elementary schools, children be taught how to pronounce each vowel correctly. Bahalacha Berurah as well also ruled that everyone must make sure to pronounce Hashem's name with the true Kamatz. Regarding the correct pronunciation of a Kamatz, it seems clear that it's like the letter of an A, but in the word father. So it's not A, but it's like A, but it's not Oi, or it's not O, right? So, yeah, exactly, right? York. Yeah, so he says, or the letter O in the word gone. In some communities, the patach is pronounced like the short A in the word bat or sat, right? Like Shabbat. That's incorrect. Exactly. It's a mistake. In others, right, we don't do that. We do Shabbat, but not the eh. It's not eh. In others, a patach is pronounced like the short U in the word bat, right? Or like the letter O in the word sun, right? So it's not really aw, and it's not other, it's ah, is sun. Yeah. This being the case, it turns out that nowadays all Sephardi Jews pronounce God's name with an authentic kamatz. The corruption is that, in other words, we sometimes make the sound of the kamatz like a patach, and less frequently we use the sound of the patach when it sounds like a kamatz. For example, the word ata. So it's really ata, right? So he says it should be pronounced as if it's saying as top or bus stop, right? But many of us just say tap, right? Like ata. It's not ata, it's ata, right? Ata. So it's ata is like the stop, right? Or the bus. Ata, bus. Okay. Growing up in the Achiezer synagogue in Brooklyn, I was taught that it depended on the consonant. Certain consonants are always pronounced if they had a kamatz under them, even if they actually have a patach. Other consonants are always supposed to be pronounced as if they have a patach, even if they have a kamatz. Right? At the same time, I was taught that officially the patach has the sound of tap, while the kamatz is the sound of top. Right? But that we purposely ignore this fact. I believe that this is the oral tradition of Syrian Jews. That's what they are. Okay? 1 second. So he comes and he says like this: students of Ashkenazi yeshivot, we're almost done, right? Many students of Ashkenazi yeshivot today have adopted this practice of praying with Ashkenazi pronunciations, even though their families are Sephardic. These young men claim that in this way they pray since they were little children. Since they attended Ashkenazi elementary schools, they say that they feel more comfortable praying in such a manner, and also that they feel that they're able to concentrate better on their tefillot. All these arguments will not excuse them from the crime of forsaking their family traditions. He says the response to Shema Shlomo, right? He relates a Sephardic student in Panovich Yeshiva Bnei Brak once asked Rav Yaakov Yisrael Kanievsky whether he may change his family's traditions to confirm with his yeshiva. Rav Kanievsky replied that he may not, that he must continue to pray in the manner that he was taught at home. Although Rav Kanievsky ruled that Sephardic Jews should adopt the practice of pronouncing Hashem's name in all other aspects of tradition, he ruled that no, that you have to keep everything else. Rav Eliezer Menachem Man, the Rav Shach, he also likewise wrote that as long as the students pray quietly, he should follow his father's traditions. Okay. On the other hand, the journal Tzohar relates that Rav Yosef Shalom the Yashiv was asked whether Shiva student should change it, and he argued that one cannot bring any proof from the Rav Nathan Adler, for it must be that Rav Nathan Adler concluded through his students and research that the Sephardic tradition is more correct, and that when Hashem gave the Torah to our nation, he spoke Sephardic pronunciation. Once he made that decision, he had no other choice but to change his own tradition and pronunciation. No other scholars of this days followed suit, not even his primary disciple, the Khatam Sofer. Apparently, they disagreed with his conclusions. Therefore, it remains forbidden for anyone to change from his family's traditions. Nevertheless, a Sephardic student has become a part of the Ashkenazi community in the yeshiva, he may change to conform to the yeshiva. So that was the Shita of Rav Eliashiv, right? It's as if that he moved from a Sephardic country to Ashkenazic one. Although there are Sephardic Jews in the city, and the Khatam Sofer also ruled there are two separate communities, so they have two separate cities. Upon discussing this episode with Ron Nishol Tzion, he remarked that he was dissatisfied with Rav Eliashiv's approach to Rav Natan's decision to adopt the Sephardic traditions. There's no basis, he argued, to say that his decision was an halachic one. On the contrary, if it was a halachic one, how could it be the Khatam Sofer did not follow it? He was only a child when he began studying under Rav Natan Adler, and he certainly was not yet learned enough to challenge Rav Natan's rulings. It is more likely that Rav Natan's penchant, for following the Kabbalah led to make the change, but it was a personal decision. Even if we would accept Rav Eliashiv's argument that if a Sephardic Jew moved to Ashkenazi neighborhood, he may adopt their customs, this should not apply in a neighborhood where there are both Ashkenazim and Sfaradim on the same block. Why should it be permissible for Sfaradi to walk into Ashkenazi synagogue and say, I'm here, I'm going to become Ashkenazi? It doesn't exist. When a student enters a yeshiva, the yeshiva does not become his permanent home. Its very nature is that students spend a few years there and then more, they move on to another place. Even while they're studying there, they still consider their homes where their families are, not the yeshiva building. Anyone familiar with this phenomenon of Sephardic students who are adopting Ashkenazi traditions will testify that is not the halacha that pushes them to take the step, nor it's the born of fear of Hashem. It's just discrimination. Sephardic students feel that they're looked down upon, that they are lower because their family names and backgrounds. So they begin to regret the fact that they were born into their families, and then they wish that they should be Finkelstein or Berkowitz or things like that. So they become convinced that Ashkenazi Torah scholars are of higher quality. And if they would know that the history of their ancestors, of their sacrifices of the Torah mitzvot, and the greatness of the Torah scholars, they would never do such thing. In the land of Israel, in the United States, and other countries, there are many Sephardic yeshiva students learning Ashkenazi yeshivot and kololim, and they all should be proud of their own heritage and preserve their traditions with all their strength.